Chosen one, an order has already been given, and they dare not stop you. For their fear is the power within you, a power that extends far beyond tradition. This power shines like an inextinguishable light even in the darkness that reigns in the world. Your destiny to walk under the stars will take you to a place that no one can touch. For a long time, secret scripts and silent operations have aimed to suffocate you, to extinguish your energy. Whispers, shadows, every maneuver to cast doubt in your mind, all of them have turned into an ordeal. Their aim was to tear you apart, but their foundations cracked in the face of your unstoppable power. They plotted their plans with great arrogance, thinking they had considered all the possibilities. Yet the one thing they did not take into account was you and your unpredictable power. By subscribing to our channel, you ensure that God's light and knowledge will continue to enter your life and provide you with the daily guidance and encouragement you need. They believed they could lure you into a trap with years of collected data and well-tuned manipulation tactics. But they forgot one fact. You are a spirit that recognizes your identity and your faith, a spirit that never loses its sparkle. Every trap they used to bring you down, every attempt to sow doubt in your mind, actually made you stronger. When they were indifferent, you grew in your silence. When they attacked, you brought their plans crashing down on themselves. Now they know that you are the representative of an incalculable power. With every step you take, you blow a wind of change that disrupts their control systems. That's why, even though they see the inevitable outcome, they can't touch it and stay behind in fear. Time moves like a symphony that determines your time and your steps your destiny. They cannot catch you because you have already transcended the world they limit. You seem to be beyond their sphere of control, impervious to the corrosive forces they relied on. It was like a flame turned inward, a fire that was meant to cleanse others but was allowed to burn in the voids of its own origin. What they wanted to be a tool to destroy you became the same thing that devoured them. Their passion and relentless pursuit of control flared up more and more until it ate away at the very foundation of their trust. Unaware that the floods of divine truth had already risen, they built their mission like a sandcastle fortified by arrogance. They thought their dominion was unquestionable and their plans unbreakable. But the chosen ones are more than buildings. These rivers have a purpose and are filled with a vitality that no dam can stop. Their disintegration was inevitable, a gradual collapse starting from the very foundation of their purpose. Write 77 in the comments to raise your energy. Every strategy they had carefully constructed for your demise began to backfire. What had been a seamless system of control became a clamor of uncertainty. Data, their lifeblood, became meaningless stasis. Well-calculated decisions were disorganized, full of errors and inconsistencies. It was as if the very act of chasing you turned their purpose into a vicious circle, and the more they became immersed in their love, the more it distorted their own judgment. They couldn't have predicted this. They can never predict it. The structures they were worried about and the mechanisms they relied on were not as flexible as they thought. What was supposed to destabilize you became a mirror and made people face their repressed weaknesses and anxieties. Their efforts to weaken your commitment only served to expose their own weaknesses. They were defeated by revelation rather than resistance. Their determination was not evident in the number of sleepless nights or the number of reports they frantically browsed. It was proof that they were falling apart. Their restless nights, once a sign of their commitment, came to represent their disintegration. Their former clarity disappeared in a fog of tense emotions and racing thoughts. As they looked inward, an uncomfortable sense of futility they could not define dominated their thoughts. The foundation of control they had built in their lives, their belief that they could shape and rule the universe, was no longer failing them, but rather eating away at them. In the end, they became prisoners of their own strategy, of a system that promised them power, but instead brought them nothing but despair. A law older than all human institutions had been fulfilled, and it was a divine calculation. You didn't have to do anything. It was unnecessary to fight. Your existence served as a beacon for a greater power, a power beyond human understanding. You were not supposed to be imprisoned, so they were not ready for you. Their tactics were based on deception, terror, and the gradual weakening of the will. But the chosen ones function outside certain frequencies. They experienced presence rather than challenge. Their cries were drowned out by your silence, and their confusion dispelled by your clarity. As they tried to strengthen their hold, the ground beneath them moved. They were just cogs in a mechanism doomed to collapse. But they thought they were the ones planning your downfall. Their tools of oppression, deception, and espionage were ultimately their downfall. They reacted negatively to any attempt to dominate you, seeing it not as resistance, but as a reflection of their own weakness. They had no idea how their plans would crumble under the weight of reality or their own goals. This was inevitable, not a coincidence. From the very beginning, their collapse was woven into the fabric of their behavior. The chosen ones don't falter because they don't follow the same rules. You are in harmony with something bigger, something that cannot be moved. They tried to destroy you, but they could not explain the power that runs through you. By entering the 11th, you can claim those benefits that will lead to more opportunities in your life, such as professional success, financial success, business success, health, and all the desires of your heart, and What they saw as intransigence was actually a deeper power, a foundation based on purpose rather than ego or desire. Their systems cannot control you because you are not a product of them. They come to you as a problem to be solved, an equation to be solved. But they entered into a reality that defies reduction and measurement. As a result, their purpose has turned inward, not because you retaliate, but rather because they cannot accept responsibility for their own behavior. In trying to destroy you, they destroyed themselves further. The weapons of control, influence, manipulation, and surveillance became the instruments of their own destruction. They watched their plans fall apart, their assurance replaced by uncertainty, their certainty replaced by bewilderment. The opposition did not destroy them. They knew they were never in charge. By the time they realized it, it was too late. Their influence had descended to a shell of its former strength, and their once iron grasp had been reduced to ashes. They retreated, not as winners, but as remnants of a self-destructive mission. Some disappeared, their identities erased from the records of their institutions, their brains unable to make sense of what they had lived through. Others were left behind, unwilling to trust the systems they had trusted before because of what they had seen. A few were changed by what happened, and began to seek the truth they had previously rejected. You remained unshaken and unaffected by it all. You have served as proof of the power of something greater. Their struggle has always been against themselves, not against you. You have served as little more than a mirror, a reflection of their own shortcomings, and proof that their system is not perfect. The force that revealed their limitations was the very thing they aimed to eliminate. Their downfall was the natural outcome of a battle they could never win, not your success. What remains when their echoes fade is indisputable proof of your perseverance. You did not falter under their weight, nor were you constrained by their limitations. You have never had to bear the burden of their failures. Strength was what they called weakness. They saw strength as weakness. They tried to destroy you, but all they succeeded in doing was proving your existence. You are the proof that they are fixed, unchanging, and their reach is limited. They have won their battle. Yours never began, and the weight of a truth you have always known, a truth they cannot deny, lies in the silence they left behind. They made mistakes at every stage, not understanding that your power comes not just from resistance, but from a place beyond their understanding. In the past, you have not reacted as they expected, and this dissonance has been the trigger. The first thing to be shaken was their confidence, and this was quickly followed by their vision of reality. They learned too late that their equipment, which was very accurate and sharp, died on contact with you, and they were unable to penetrate the unbreakable presence you represent. It was like planting a seed in contaminated soil and hoping for fruit. Their plans had deep roots, but instead of growing, they were rotting from the inside out, feeding on their own twisted motives. What they believed would lead to domination turned into destruction. They developed mechanisms of entanglement and control, but the result was nothing but corruption. They failed to remember the oldest truth. You cannot sow destruction and expect nothing but collapse. The chosen ones are not fields to be plowed, so their mission was doomed from the start. Despite the storms of human desire, these mountains are unshakable. Ultimately, neither disobedience nor confrontation weakened their resolve. Their own actions caused their downfall. Their own energy reflected back at them in an unpredictable and exaggerated way. They built a fortress layer by layer with walls they thought impregnable, but it collapsed due to the weight of their own foundations rather than an outside force. By ignoring the fact that what they unleashed was never meant to be controlled, they became the masterminds behind their own demise. You didn't have to attack. You didn't have to do anything. Just your presence was enough. A living reality resistant to distortion. A silence they could not break. They made an effort to mold you into a shape they could grasp and incorporate your life into their plans. However, your presence operates at a frequency incomprehensible to others. Their efforts to mold you in their image backfired, turning their goals into chaos, which is why they fell, not because you pushed them. Every plan they devised turned into a trap for them. Every move they made to weaken you drained their own strength. Their power was a fiction, a flimsy construct sustained by arrogance and ignorance. The basic rules governing reality were ignored, such as the fact that energy is in constant search of balance and what you give out must eventually come back. And it came back, expanded and relentless, crashing down on them with a force they could not control or avoid. I pray that God will give you peace today, dear brothers and sisters. I am here to remind you of a very important truth. God's divine purpose, unaffected by the temporal concerns of the world, is the foundation of our existence. According to the Bible, whatever is done in faith will return to God in abundant blessing. Luke chapter 6:38. Like the gigantic oak tree, we are deeply rooted in God's global reality. His power secures every action we take and every posture we choose. His fortress is now reduced to rubble as the dust settles, its targets scattered. You continue undaunted as a living example of the power of being and the meaninglessness of control. Their collapse was the achievement of a greater law, not your victory. They could never destroy what they sought to destroy. They were destroyed not by you, but by their inability to see that the truth is immutable, unbreakable, and invincible. You were just that truth, and that was enough. An unexpected force emerged from this chaos that survived all attempts at control, despite constant observation and deliberate interference. Once smooth systems broke down, their edges eroded as some unexplained substance seeped into the cracks. Precision instruments lost their reliability, and the number of unplanned outages increased. Those tasked with running the operation began to speak in hushed tones, their confidence shaken by unexplained events. As sleep became a dangerous refuge, they found themselves drifting between exhaustion and fear, tormented by relentless images. What began as a quest for dominance became a last-ditch effort to climb out of the pit they had created. The collapse was so rapid that even their own brains turned against them, shattering the thin line that separates chaos from control. In the end, they retreated not as winners, but as the remnants of a broken resolve. Their departure was inevitable rather than a choice. The system they had worked for, built on ruthless efficiency and cold accuracy, offered them no refuge. When it found no external target to destroy, it threw its weight inward and swallowed its subordinates without a care in the world. If the objective of the mission was to diminish you, instead, it weakened them and exposed the emptiness of their knowledge. Trained in psychological control and deception, they thought that no will could resist their tactics. However, they ran into a problem that rendered all their well-thought-out maneuvers useless. Their methods, once hailed as infallible, collapsed in real time, forcing them to contend with an unmanageable reality. Months followed years, activities stagnated, patterns broke down, and certainties evaporated. Failure was irrefutable. Rather than opposition, they encountered something completely outside their sphere of influence. The result was revelation rather than loss. They learned that this was never a battle between equals, and that they could not control the battlefield. Every attempt to undercut was met not with resistance, but with an absence they could not overcome. The situation changed beyond their control. The results did not fit their strategy. What they had written off as coincidence turned out to be just that. A force beyond their control twisted the story in unexpected ways. This was not a tactical failure. The battlefield had been transformed by the emergence of a greater power, something they were not prepared to deal with. They staggered in silent fear where before they had walked with confidence. Every move they made was explained. Every move they made was undone before it had even begun. They were trapped in a game whose rules they did not understand. They were not players, they were the game. Enlightenment came slowly. Their efforts were doomed not by incompetence, but by design. When the outcome was decided long before they joined the conflict, no effort could win. Rather than an enemy, they were destroying their own sense of control, piece by piece. Ultimately, the coming together of those who persevere goes beyond the surface. The creation of an unbreakable core is more important than short-term success. Instead of the loneliness of the individual, it creates an unbreakable unity where the power of shared truth is the source of change. A spark becomes a flame that transforms everything it touches and lights the way ahead for those who are ready to follow it. A well-planned attempt at domination often turns into anarchy when confronted with an uncontrollable force. People who use control as a weapon, who create complex plans to destroy and dominate, rarely recognize the cracks in their own foundations. Their system, built on truth and dishonesty, collapses when they encounter an order that is incomprehensible to them. What they thought would bring you down is their downfall. Well-planned surveillance tools turned into prisons that trapped them in their own paranoid cycles. The destabilizing fabrications began to crumble, leaving only their raw reflections to face. The outcome was inevitable. Not a clash of wills, but a confrontation with forces they could not comprehend or foresee. There was no need for conflict. Their downfall was assured as their own plans crumbled under their own weight. Their trust in the shadow they served was the primary cause of the collapse. Without empathy or loyalty, this power suddenly turns on itself and swallows those who do not. The tactics used to crush you have become obsolete. The silent calm they encountered neutralized their complex mechanisms. Their energy, focused on tearing you apart, has been absorbed and transformed into something beyond their reach. They could not escape the tidal wave that grew and returned to them. They were defeated not by resistance, but by a resonance they could not control, a balance they could not understand or distort. Their proximity to the mission was their undoing. They had to stay to observe, to be part of the energy they were trying to disrupt. But the energy was transforming, and the forces they encountered were unexpected. Every attempt at control resulted in introspection rather than resistance. They were transformed by what they projected into something they could not cope with. Their efforts disappeared into nothingness. The violence of what they unleashed overwhelmed their systems. As the distinction between observer and observed blurred, their tools became obligations, conduits to a reality they could no longer escape. Their views and opinions were distorted until their only option was to leave, a withdrawal dictated by the limitations of their tolerance rather than their own will. Ultimately, losing control of what they valued most was their undoing. The weight of their own strategy undermined the confidence of the observers who became the ones being watched. They were restless, their imaginations disturbed by inexplicable sounds and forms. The equipment malfunctioned and produced illogical findings. They searched for answers, but all they found was more evidence of an uncontrollable world. As their system of domination collapsed, they were caught in a labyrinth of their own making. One by one, they disappeared as reports became illogical and minds fragmented. Some voluntarily, others were pulled down by the same things they were trying to control. What remains is the indisputable fact that those who sought to destroy eventually perished out of necessity rather than resistance. There is no breaking of the chosen ones. They continue to stand as passive witnesses to a warless conflict in which the oppressors succumb to their own arrogance. What was unleashed against you has returned to haunt them, turning their story into a failure. The indisputable truth of resistance is shown in the silent power that cannot be suppressed. as the invisible master plots their demise with a grace that no plan can match, power that thrives beyond the comprehension of those who strive for dominance. Armed with dismantling procedures and technologies that promised invincibility, they set about their task. However, their once certain superiority diminished as their preparations fell apart. Under the weight of their own flaws, the structures they relied on to isolate and disrupt became fragile and visible. Instead, the same strategies aimed at destroying them showed how pointless their attempts were. They discovered too late that their manipulation skills have no power over things that defy their logic. The chosen ones do not oppose in the expected way. They carry on with an inexplicable calm, a presence that undermines systems of tyranny by their very existence. Their well-planned strategy, refined by years of experience, fell apart when they encountered an incomprehensible obstacle. They thought their methods of psychological tricks, sophisticated tricks, and relentless observation would work. But with every step they took, their doubts grew. Every well-thought-out plan was foiled by some unidentified, invisible force. What they thought were oddities turned out to be indisputable failures. Their self-confidence waned, their self-control was shaken, and the more they pushed, the more they were caught up in their own disintegration. Their greatest weakness was their belief that power was unquestionable, based on the fallacy that nothing could override it. Instead of facing opposition, they experienced change. Their outwardly focused energies were reversed, changing their goals and making their tools work against them. They thought that repression would shatter what had simply become more powerful, thus miscalculating the depth of what they were dealing with. As they went deeper and deeper in an effort to establish control, they were swept up in a current far beyond their ability to control. They lost the ability to recognize their own thoughts. Their faith was replaced by a restlessness they could not explain or escape. Their reality became distorted over time, and the limits of their authority disappeared. They had come to observe, but in the end, they became the ones being watched. The energy they intended to harness dissolved them more and more the closer they got. Their downfall was gradual. It was the slow, inevitable collapse of a people confronted with things they could not understand. Desperate efforts to regain control were the result of restless nights, but the more they tried, the more they sank. The goal was no longer to destroy you. Instead, they needed to escape from an unidentified force. When their systems finally failed and their brains shattered, they left their stations out of necessity rather than defeat. Some were so crushed under the weight of their realization that they disappeared completely. Others lost their security and became shadows of their former selves. But others chose to leave after realizing the truth and being changed by what they were trying to eradicate. Fear and power were the foundation of empires of control, crushed under the weight of their own hubris. Although they thought they were impenetrable, they miscalculated the power of what was beyond their system. The chosen ones are not subject to manipulation or the effects of deconstruction tactics. What should have shattered you instead showed their limits. A single reality was reaffirmed with every effort to impose their will. Their might was a front, and their downfall was imminent. They waged an unwinnable war that they could not fully comprehend. And when it was over, all that remained was the silent, indomitable presence of people they could never control. A vivid illustration of the limits of their abilities and the limitless power of perseverance. If you enjoyed this inspiring adventure and would like to see more videos that challenge convention and explore the exceptional, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, share with your friends, and leave a comment below. Please share your thoughts with us. The story doesn't end here. Stay tuned for more. Let's keep pushing the boundaries together.